scale. It's just huge, almost 3 meters by 3 meters. It's playful, it's celebratory, it feels fun, it's simple, it's almost childlike in its simplicity. And it's really touching and beautiful that it was created by someone who was so incredibly frail. And he spent his days in this contraption which he wheeled around his studio called the taxi bed. And in the taxi bed, he picked up big bits of paper which were painted these matte, flat, bold, vibrant colours. And he got a big pair of shears and he started hacking into them. He said it was like drawing with colour. And this is the result. Matisse was obviously not just cutting. It's as if he's there with the paper just and then managing to kind of levitate these enormous blocks of colour up in space. He's pared something down, he's looking for simplicity, he's looking for the essence. And of course, most of all, he's dealing in big, thick, saturated blocks of colour. I'm convinced that it's the work of a modern master and one who's still influencing the way we see the world around us today.
It's quite familiar, isn't it? Matisse's snail has even crawled into the London 2012 Olympics logo. Sometimes you could be forgiven for thinking, that man Matisse, he's everywhere. And someone who knows all about that is the leading British fashion designer, Sir Paul Smith.
Matisse, for me, is just the boss of colour. The famous snail, I've used it as inspiration for colour, stripes, pattern. When you're playing with yarns, that's a nice striped sweater. All the Matisse colours on one pair of shoes. Often you think this colour and this colour work really well, but he'd sort of throw colours together that maybe nobody had experimented with before. He goes, you know, and you're just like, wow, that's pretty brave. That could be a bag, but the flap on the bag could be in a blue or something, or a green.
I'm quite intrigued by this idea that when you were starting out,
Yeah.
you actually looked to Matisse to kind of show you the way about how to use colour.
Yeah.
Did the world seem quite black and white?
I've been doing it a long time, so I'm very old. So when I started, men were mostly wearing, you know, very classical colours, and men were still quite nervous about wearing a colourful sweater. I just suddenly do a whole load of Matisse colours, just nudging the British male into colour.
Do you ever wear anything that isn't Paul Smith?
No, because it's free. What else can I show you? Tie design, T-shirts.
Is this like your notes for the beginning of the collection?
Yeah. Blue Nudes take some of the shapes from his other work, colour from this work, and then mixing them together. If the boss sort of did it, then it's good enough for me.
French fashion designer Yves Saint Laurent was another big Matisse fan. He even used to say that he wished he'd been Matisse. His most notorious ad for opium perfume featured Sophie Dahl as an odalisque. Remember Matisse's naked concubines? The billboard was so raunchy, it was quickly banned. These weren't, though. Dresses by Yves Saint Laurent. This is Matisse's Polynesia the Sky. It inspired a famous dress worn by a very famous French woman. Carla Bruni at World Cup '98. Recognise the doves? So Matisse is still very much in our world. He's inspired countless painters, as well as fashion designers and interior designers. You can see his influence in commercial logos and kids' cartoons. Vibrant colour, simple, expressive shapes, less clutter, less detail, more impact, more feeling. Matisse pioneered the look of the modern world. And right at the end of his life, when you'd think he could go no further, he created something utterly unlike anything he'd done before. Matisse was an atheist, or that's what everyone thought. He once wrote, "My only religion is love of the work to be created and total sincerity." But when recovering from the operation for bowel cancer, he was nursed by a woman who later became a Dominican nun, Sister Jacques Marie. There was no chapel in her convent, just down the road from Matisse's home in Vence. So to thank her for her care, he had one built, designing it right down to the last detail.
This beautifully tranquil garden is the setting for the chapel that Matisse designed right at the end of his life. He called this place the crowning achievement of his entire career, which is a completely extraordinary thing to say, given that first and foremost he was known as a painter. I've never visited it before, and I'm just about to go inside and find out what it's like. What an incredibly still and serene space this is. This is the Stations of the Cross. This is the agony of Christ. It's an image of suffering which you never ever see in Matisse's art. He has that at the back. And opposite it is this beautifully colourful, look at this window, this is called the Tree of Life. And it's all about growth with these patterns of leaves and foliage sprawling up. And I think, just being here, that window repudiates that. It says, you know what, it doesn't all have to be agony and strife. It's so appropriate he does this right at the end of his career, because look here, I mean, this is the sunlight coming through, it's glowing. All his life he tried to do this on canvas, with pigments that would really hit you. But in a way, none of them have a patch on this. This is just... You could look at this all day. This is a man who spent his life foremost painting. That's what he did. And in this place, he's left oil paints behind entirely. And instead, the substance that he's working with, his material, is light. And Matisse said that all his life, he was trying to create a sense of calmness in his pictures or in his art. And he said the reason was because he himself was in need of peace. And I really relate to that. I mean, you know, I don't really know anyone who doesn't have moments of anguish and anxiety and inner turmoil. And he suffered from that throughout his life. And in his work, he created something which eased that. And what else can you ask of a great work of art? I genuinely feel quite moved by it. And I think the reason is that he was so old when he designed this place. And I find that phenomenal. The fact that he had this kind of final surge of creativity just shortly before his death. It's just so beautiful.
Matisse said, "Do I believe in God? Yes, when I work." And with this chapel, his work was done. And his creations of simplicity and colour would change our world.
If you'd like to find out more about the art and the influence of Matisse, Picasso, Dali and Warhol, then go online to bbc.co.uk/modernmasters.